Okay, hello everybody. This is Surayya from the Purposeful Professional from Purposeful Professional Media, and we are back with another amazing guest. Today I have Tish Sharma. She is an engineer. She does so many things and also has a very inspirational story about her life, career, and trajectory through tech. So, welcome to the podcast, Tish. Introduce yourself to the listeners.
Hey, I'm Hitisha, so I go by Tish. Friends and family call me Tish, so whatever you would prefer. I started my journey at University of Minnesota about like 9 years ago almost, as an undergrad in computer engineering. I started with a background of a mix of computer science and electrical engineering, but as fate may have it, or as my own inclinations may have it, I ended up doing a lot more of electrical design and design development for infrastructures, buildings, facilities, spaces, places, whatever you may call it. And I have been on this trajectory since. From Minnesota to then working for a little bit in New York, and then now in California Bay Area with projects all over United States. It's been one hell of a ride. Lots of learning for sure, and lots of learning that I still have to do. But I'm so excited about this path, and super excited to share more about my own trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds amazing. And I just want to say to a special shout out to the women in engineering because I know it is not easy. And when you said Minnesota, University of Minnesota, I can only imagine what it was like being an engineering student in Minnesota. Oh my God, crazy. But I
Coming from
think
the
that
tropics.
absolutely coming from the tropics. I was just about to say that Minnesota winter. Oof. that
Froze my brain for a bit there.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I can't even imagine. Okay. Well, we have a segment that we like to call Pop Purpose, and we like to talk about popular culture with the guests and kind of like a pop culture hot topic related to your career. So I was reading Business Insider, or I saw a Business Insider post on LinkedIn, and it talked about Gen Z's love affair with tech being over. And essentially, what they are trying to say is that Gen Z has become increasingly disillusioned with jobs in the tech sector, now showing more of a preference for healthcare, government jobs. I guess they think more stable jobs. And we're going to get into that. Like if tech is less stable or even more stable, right? We're going to get into that during our conversation. But even as somebody who, a proverbial TikTok watcher, which I hate that I am that, but I remember seeing this like, big tech boom when TikTok first got popular. And now it seems like it's healthcare now. Like everyone's in healthcare, everyone is in government, or, so I definitely have seen the change. So that's something I wanted to talk to you about as somebody who is in tech, has always wanted to pursue tech or always wanted to pursue STEM, why you think that is. So let me know if you're ready for this conversation.
Yeah, sure. Let's have at it.
Okay. So the first question is like, why do you think Gen Z is becoming like increasingly disillusioned with jobs in the tech sector?
I believe it's just been the way market has been in the last 10 years. When I was graduating from university back in 2016, it was just almost a second nature to be in tech. It was the default pathway. I myself was on that trajectory for some time until I just happened to get a call for this interview in the buildings and infrastructure sector. And just the circumstances worked out in that sense that I ended up in that industry, and I ended up kind of feeling the sense of, okay, I get to not be just behind my desk. To me, as a person who was just getting out of school, living in United States by myself in a different country, but experiencing first job and freedom for the first time, in that sense, like in the economic or financial sense, I thought, okay, this is great. Let me try this opportunity. And when as I grew in this career, and as I looked around and saw this tech bubble, I was at a point when the tech bubble was like, it was still growing. It was just getting bigger and bigger, and it always seemed like the right thing to do. But also in the last decade, a lot of our engineers and students went into that industry. A lot of their parents or peers or just the popular culture and just advancement of technology just made it so much more easier for it to be the default path. But over the years, we saw then in other spaces like healthcare infrastructure, and the government infrastructure, because even in engineering sector, my projects increased in these areas, the projects related to healthcare facilities and university healthcare centers. Some of my biggest projects in the last year were these areas. So it was also because of the fact that now there was an entire generation of workforce which is getting lured into one area, and now the other area is kind of empty, and is not getting the best of talent, if not completely empty. It's not the creme de la creme from Stanford is not planning to go into like healthcare and design a healthcare building. And
Mm,
why was that happening? Because there is just the entire system, entire world pushing you to be in tech. That's the market that's paying you a lot more. And that's the market where your peers are going. So I think it eventually made it so much so that it just became inflated with too many people vying for the same type of jobs. And then the other sectors, the government, federal, and just healthcare, engineering sector, even like the entire engineering infrastructure sector has been facing the same problem. And that's one of the areas that I've been doing a personal research on. So the reason being, it's just the generation that got lured into that one side of things and created this sort of imbalance. And I think that's where the disillusion comes from, because now that balance has so much supply, that one sector has so much supply and less, almost like so much supply of professionals, but there are not many jobs there. So that
mm,
imbalance has also caused instability, because I'm pretty sure if people were going into tech earlier, they were going for like financial stability, for better prospects. And if you take that financial stability away, whether it is in the form of increasing unemployment rates or just layoffs across the industry, across the world, if you take that stability foundation away, it kind of makes them question, okay, why am I even going there? So I
mm,
think that triggered this whole movement of, let me look into other sectors. So that supply versus demand factor, entire generation being lured into one sector. And then third one would be Gen Z, I think, tend to be a lot more conscientious with their choices,
mm.
at
Yeah.
least at least when it comes to who am I working with? Are these people good? Is this company good? These are the questions that were not asked before. So just that a cultural shift among the millennials and cuspers, even Gen Zs, and the next generations to follow. I think these are going to be the questions that they ask themselves a lot more. Is this a good place? Do they value me? And when you start asking those questions, you see it's easier to relate your profession with a purpose, such as working in healthcare, because it helps people, because it helps my country, it helps my community. And
Mm,
then it helps you even working for, like, let's say like NASA. There are a lot of like federal jobs and government jobs that like outside of just the space exploration aspect of it, that NASA kind of helps foster. So people are going into these sectors because these answer some of their existential or like purpose driven questions, even, such as, why do I do this? What impact does it have? So I think those three factors are contributing to the disillusionment and a shift in the coming years.
yeah, no, I think you hit everything on the mark. I think you hit everything on the mark. And not just because I agree with you, but because you brought so much perspective and so much nuance into this conversation. One thing you talked about that I want to highlight for the listeners is the difference between, we could say, software-based models and then hard tech. So I do think that tech has been, if we think about it, like what was tech back when I was in college, even before Facebook became Meta, it was the fame companies. It was the bigger companies. That's what everybody wanted to work for. It was a hot thing. And nobody thought of tech as in like, wearable technology or any sort of hardware that people can actually tangibly use. But like you said,
Mhm.
your background proves that that hardware is needed, but also that, technical understanding of buildings, facilities, etc., is also needed.
Mhm.
And I think that
Yeah.
over glamorization of the technology sector, whenever anything is over glamorized, it's always going to lead to disillusionment. Because for those that worked in there, you know, seeing them get laid off en masse, which is what we have
Hmm.
seen due to the fact that they hire more than they can, you know, handle at any given time. But also thinking about what has the technology sector really done for our society in terms of giving
Hmm.
back. You know, you referenced that as well, that we're looking for companies that give back, that reinvest profits into the community, and not like corporate social responsibility, but an actual
Hmm.
like, you know, social impact is built into the model. I don't
Yeah.
think tech has the capacity to make a shift in that infrastructure, given that these companies, if we can think of the main companies, they've existed for like how long? I mean, 20 years almost. So I think they don't really have the power to create the new types of tech jobs that people want, or like you said, the new types of purposeful jobs that people want. And I think all of that is
Yeah.
leading to the disillusionment. So I have to agree. I have to agree 100%.
Yeah, for sure. And like when I say tech, tech versus other sectors, I do very well understand that tech is super integrated into pretty much everything we do. So
Mhm.
like engineering, the industry that I am right now, even in engineering, it's called high tech industry. So we are basically developing semiconductor facilities right now where the high tech tools come in order to provide a place for expansion and building of those type of tools. You are always brushing shoulders with technology, and it is like an integrated part of what you do. So you will never be very far away from it, but it is definitely, there's always been a question of to what extent is it contributing to the job you do, to the world that you live in, and the type of contribution uh, that specific tech company is making. Does that actually change the world in any way, or it's just a fun idea that helps that tech company make money, you know? So there are like some other conversations that come into the picture where you mentioned corporate social responsibility. I think that sometimes it just becomes an evasive tool for a lot of companies to cover up a lot of other things that they're doing just
Yeah.
because they can sign up for CSR.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that leads me to my next question. The article says that, you know, high achieving students were previously attracted to the tech sector because tech, they were told, was going to democratize data. And we're talking about, you know, traditional, we could say like the main company, tech, create a digital bridge to a better and more equitable world. Instead, tech companies have been responsible for spreading misinformation, fueling hate speech, sowing digital addiction, and exacerbating an epidemic of mental illness amongst teenagers and young adults. Do you agree or disagree? And if so, right, how can companies change the narrative potentially of the sector to attract more young talent into the fold?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. When I think of a question like this, it eventually takes me to the analogy of social media.
Mm.
The reason being, and I'm gonna have to like think a little bit and collect my thoughts on this because I think it is an important question. So let's say if I look at social media, I'm very well aware of the benefits that it has. I see my younger brother just like be extremely aware of things that took me like 2 years, 3 years in my journey to figure out, just because social media has connected the world so well and has made information so accessible that people can access information that only their future self can have with experience so quickly. Like they can know now that, hey, this is the better way um, to get my degree, or this is a better way to launch a business, because they can access information so much faster from like almost the future versions of themselves. um, and all of that really pushes the world forward in just an unimaginable way. We are experiencing things that we haven't seen before in the world, whether it is just like AI models development to just like our the type of electronic vehicles and integration of technology into vehicles, and those becoming a system in and of itself. And then that expansion into like buildings and infrastructure, how infrastructure has been collecting data from the about the community in order to then invest into further bettering of infrastructure. So I'm very well aware of the positive aspects of it. But at the same time, I think there is definitely a requirement for the companies to be extremely scrutinizing of the content that gets pushed on their platforms and the kind of messaging their leaders and their promoters and the enthusiasts are spreading. Like, for example, if a kid sees an example of a tech entrepreneur not treating people in the best way, or being a misogynist and disrespecting women, and if that side of his nature or her nature is glorified and pushed in the media, then the work that he did in the background to actually gain that type of freedom and influence gets completely overshadowed by just this facade, this caricature of like this, just complete like not the right type of professional to model your behavior after.
Mhm.
So I think those are the areas that I personally think need to improve, where the type of narrative, like you said, is pushed out, the type of people who are being glorified and and are being made examples of. Once we fix that, there's a lot of good happening underneath, and that the advancement that has happened in the last few years, the type of data we have been able to collect, the type of models to just assess these data that have been building, like could be used towards finding the cure for cancer, and like really anti-aging processes, and like helping the senior citizens live better life and live out their the last days of their lives in the best, most glorious ways possible. Like there's so many other problems that can be solved with the kind of information we have. And that's my own personal beef with tech, where I do see it constantly being used as a medium for a sole individual's rise to like millionairism or billionairism, that
Yeah.
which can be used towards something so much bigger. So yeah, it's always like the two sides to the coin, but unfortunately, with the world that we live in, with the fast marketing, where we need to make money from things that look cool, with the agendas that look very controversial, it's easier to push out narratives of like the toxic behaviors being glorified, the technology which doesn't really serve a lot of people but looks good, looks cool, being circulated a lot more. So yeah, that was a little bit of a rant, but I think it kind of covers the point.
Yeah, no, it covers the point, and I think it brings us to what I would say are the maybe top two reasons why there's this disillusionment. Building off of what you said, I would say number one, it's data privacy. Like, what is the data being used to do? Is it being used to keep us more addicted? Is it being used to destroy our mental health even more, or bombard us with content that they want engagement, they want time on site, they want people to be emotionally affected by what they see? And then I would say on the other side, it's an algorithmic problem. It's why are certain things being pushed? We can sense that negative content especially gets more likes, clicks, shares. So they're thinking about in a system where we have created a algorithm that says, oh, the more someone likes something, comments on it, shares on it, and this is especially just with regards to social media in general, that is what is most engaging. So I'm going to push that even more. That leads to clickbait. That leads to just a destructive way of using the internet. So I would say it's an algorithmic problem, and it also is a data privacy problem. And I would say that's why people are just kind of like over it, because it's like, okay, number one, there's no data transparency with any of these companies. And once again, we're talking about the big tech companies now. But also there's a lack of like conscientiousness in like what you're pushing out. It's not just going to affect someone's mental, it might make them in a worst case scenario, do something really crazy, hurt themselves, hurt somebody
Yeah.
else, right? And I think that those sort of ethical dilemmas is they're not what they dealt with when they first started, because it was like, hey, we're just trying to change the world. But now we know changing the world involves, ethical technology. It involves a lot of different things, humanist technology. It involves you thinking about the person behind the screen. And I think that's the level of consciousness that, unfortunately, the larger companies, like I said, because they've been built a certain way, I don't think they can be the ones to create that change. The new people coming up will have to really be humanist and think very
Mm,
strongly about what are people getting from using this that can tangibly improve their life outside of just attention, likes, and comments. So
yeah.
yeah, we're just gonna keep evolving as a species, Homo sapiens. We're just gonna keep evolving.
Yeah, we're all
You know?
dealing with this for the first time. And
Yeah.
you touched upon data privacy and that being used for either a case A scenario where you're just gamifying existing applications, you're just making more addictive content, versus scenario B, where that data is being used for, let's say, betterment of healthcare systems. And
Mhm.
I'm not saying that those two cannot exist in parallel, because I do understand, like, money make the worlds go round at the end of the day in most of these cases. So if tech is being used in that sectors, I would really love to see, instead of it being just um you know pushing out more and more apps of just social connections, maybe we could have more apps of like um healthcare understanding. And I know that there is research being done in these spaces too. There's like a bunch of like upcoming smart cities project where the idea is to use understanding of how people are using existing spaces. Where are they hanging out? What are they talking about? What are the spaces they need most access to? And to develop smart cities with that in mind, to make sure the infrastructure is completely designed for an individual to thrive. And to like not wait for hours for ambulance, for example, because the city has been designed in such a way that there's just such an easier access to a healthcare center, or an ASC, or like a smaller, which is ambulatory surgical center, like smaller centers around. So like those are the two scenarios, right? One where tech is being used to just make more money, or over gamify things, and kind of rob children who are growing up in this world of distractions, to rob them off of their ability to think and to focus. A lot of the I know a lot of companies don't want to take responsibility for that, but then who else is going to? We are all going through this stage of the world together at the end of the day. So those are just some of the big picture questions that I think need to coexist with. I know there's a supply and a demand, and I know people need to make money. We need to thrive and excel. But I think if we just work a little bit harder, we can answer both questions, or at least try our best.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
100%. That was a great opener. Tish gave us all her knowledge.
We
She
just
took
need to
us
work harder.
college. Yeah, no, I feel
And
like you
better.
took us to university. You took us back to Minnesota because that was a masterclass. I love that. So yeah, we divide these episodes into three categories: people, career, culture. And I want to get into your story. Let's start with the people section. Um, it if there was a movie or television character that you feel like best exemplified who you were as a child and a young adult, who would that person be and why?
It has to be from a movie.
It doesn't have to be from, it could be from a book, any sort of like, I look outside the world and I see a character and I'm like, oh, that's me. I'm that person. They are me. We are the same.
I don't think I have ever really met a character or a personality from a movie or something that would like completely like I could 100% relate to. But there have been characters, like, their personalities. If I could stitch them all together, there will be like, one one character who I could completely relate to. But I do relate to um Elsa from the movie Frozen. Elsa has a younger sister, and she's all about like family and loves her people, her community, but she's also experiences this sense of like this power and something that she wants to like, whether it is her inner strength or just inner calling, inner purpose, and she's always like kind of restless because of it throughout her life, and she uses that to ultimately she accepts that, she uses that to make her life better, and she helps her own family while doing that. So because the contents such as purpose and community, family, giving back to people I love matters so much to me, I think I relate to Elsa a lot. Also, she's like fiercely independent, so I think I definitely resonate with that. Not that I never set out to be like, oh, I'm going to be fiercely independent, but I just feel like just had it in me.
Yeah, no, funny that you bring up Elsa from Frozen because I don't know why Frozen was playing in my house the other day, but I was just like,
Oh, nice.
no, because it's one of those things. The nostalgia is real, but no, I see that a little bit in your story that you had this desire to use your power for good. You talk about tech for good and like using it for good, and there's a sense of like, hey, we're born with powers, we're born with these special gifts, these special talents in the world, and what are you going to do with them? Like you can use them for harm or you can use them for good. And I think that Elsa's character like wrestles with that, like wrestles with what she
Hmm.
use her gifts for. But at the same time, what one thing I love about Frozen is that there was a perception that her talent was negative. Like there was a perception of like, oh, we need to like lock her away because everything she touches turns to ice.
Hmm.
Maybe that the same thing that people criticizing you sometimes is the same thing that makes you great or that makes you special. And I think
Hmm.
her own process of having to learn like this is not something for me to hide but something I can use in a spectacular way. I think that once again it's Disney like being spiritual and in our minds and
Yeah.
lessons about ourselves. But for some reason your story made me think of Ariel the Little Mermaid, and we're on the pre-call, you talked about like wanting to go to America, wanting to see different things like that, and I think of like Ariel, like part of your world, like wanting to see things outside of her own perception and like outside of being under the sea. She wanted to be on land, and I don't know why when we were doing the pre-call I kept on hearing like part of your world in my head, like you had a desire, yeah, like really corny, I don't know why, like
That's so cool. I
I don't
love
know
that.
why, like
Could
that
be
this
my
is how it
background
went.
music.
But I just kept on hearing it because I was like, okay, like you had this desire to come from India and literally come into another world. And I could only imagine the forces that were probably saying, like stay in India or maybe, go to the US and just study and then come back to India. But it seemed like you really wanted to make a life for yourself and you wanted to get like Ariel wanted her legs, wanted your legs. So
Yeah.
so that's
Not the
what
wings,
I thought
not
of.
the wings, but legs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Not the wings, but like she wanted her legs. So that's one thing that I think about too. So yeah, that was just a little fun intro. But take me back to your upbringing in India, right? Like you said, you grew up inspired by those in America, like Oprah Winfrey, Maya Angelou, Barack Obama.
Mhm.
What gave you the willingness to find these role models outside of your culture, and like how did that impact the decisions you made regarding your life and your education?
Yeah, so for that question, there's I don't think there was a planned idea of, okay, these are the role models I'm going to follow. I was just a middle school kid just trying to look for stories and um, people who were seemingly living a better life. Growing up, I was born into a very like it was a relatively stable childhood, but there were elements of it that were not 100% right for, a kid's growth, a kid's like stability and like mental and emotional stability, so to speak. So being in a little bit of like volatile environment, even though like my mom has always been like the biggest supporter and like just the biggest push whenever it comes to my dreams. I have gone to her as a middle school kid when you're not influenced by the world, especially during that time when we are just at the cusp of social media. I would ask like all types of questions to like, Mom, why do we have to live at one place forever? Why do you live in one house for so long? Why do women always have to have kids? It's like a wave of like marriage and kids being pushed towards every single woman. Like, what age do I have to start doing? Like, I was the one asking these questions, and
Yeah.
not from the perspective of like these things are bad. Of course, I was just like, but why? Why are these stories so similar everywhere? And my mom was always like, oh, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do this either. You don't have to go in that one direction either. Or you can do all of that, plus you can do other things. So, as a middle school kid who was just asking these questions, specifically because I was a little bit triggered by my own volatility in the environment to see, okay, then what else can I do? Because this where I am is not the doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel the happiest, the highest version of myself living here. So that being in a combination of being in a little bit of a volatile environment and pairing that up with like an extremely supportive mom on the other side, it kind of just like pushed me in that direction of seeking out more examples where, okay, mom said it's okay to ask these questions. Mom said it's fine to do all of these things. Let me see people who are doing that. And that's how I came across the story of Oprah Winfrey, who had gone through some of the worst tragedies, like being raped and being discriminated and not being not considered equal to other students in her classes in her school. And seeing those stories just, although I couldn't relate to those stories exactly in the sense of like discrimination and stuff, but I could see that, hey, that person is dealing with factors way bigger than herself. Like as a child, things are just way bigger than you. You cannot control your environment. So
Mm,
you're always at the mercy of external. So
yeah.
I was like, okay, what are these people doing who are always at the mercy of the external, right? So then I saw her story and I was like, wow, like she's really making world such a better place for everyone, right? Like
Oh, hold on. What happened? Oof.
hello.
Yeah, you
I
logged off. Are you back on?
Yeah, I'm back on. I
Yeah.
don't know what happened. I was just like my screen just started getting like blurry and then it just like got disconnected when I tried to like
Totally fine. You were on that point about Oprah, like her life struggles, and then
yeah.
if you want to just like hop back in.
Okay, yes. Sorry about that. I just got a bunch of notifications and it just disappeared. Um, so I was talking about how reading her examples and seeing that someone like herself, who was always at these, always being in that oppressive situation as growing up as a young woman, and she could make a life for herself. There's nothing like she did not come from the same country, did not come from the same type of same exact background, but there were certain elements as a human being I could relate to and empathize with. And seeing her example, seeing her do so well, not only do well for herself in like quote unquote selfish way to like just she wasn't just looking out for herself. She actively contributes. People look up to her and she provides solutions to live better, to be better. And I was like, how come a person who comes from this environment actually becomes a beacon of light for the world in such a big way? So like, and then there were more examples of that. Barack Obama was one of the examples. And former Indian President APJ Abdul Kalam was one of those examples.
Mm.
And these people had like lived completely different lives, even in their personal lives. Like one of the presidents, the example of president I gave you, he never got married. He was just he was married to science and tech and advancement of such in such a manner that it just didn't occur to him to live life a certain way. And then
Yeah.
Obama, on the other hand, married this beautiful, wonderful Michelle Obama, who is a force of nature on her own. And you see his example. And then you see Oprah Winfrey, who just rejects traditional and conventional ways of living life, whether it is living by herself, whether it is like cherishing friendships. And she teaches like such incredible examples of just modeling your own life. And these models, although these are just three or four of the many models that I was seeing, my mind just kind of started looking for more. And it's like what you seek, you find more of it in the world. And it would just be with that that started snowballing with me seeing these examples and knowing that all of these examples exist in different parts of the world. So I must go to different parts of the world and experience them for myself, because there was just something like that deeply resonated with my soul. I was like, I belong there. I belong wherever these people are. And as a child, I just knew it. I had such a strong conviction that I need to be where people are making things happen, because in where I wasn't a very powerful place to be, you know? So,
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And I think you're speaking at length about something that I hear a lot of women from, we could say India, Nepal, Nigeria. I've spoken to guests from all over the world, and it seems like growing up in, I mean, the US, I would consider the US to be patriarchal, but then again, I know
it is, yeah.
societies are more patriarchal than the United States. And growing up in that as a young woman, there is a desire for freedom. There is a desire to define your life on your own terms. And I hear that over and over again. That's a common thread I hear, especially amongst those who lived and grew up in India, that dealing with some of the, pressures to be married or pressures to be a certain way. There was this desire to break free from that and decide, if I do want to be married, it will be on my own merit when I decide to get married. Or if I do want to have a career, I don't want to feel locked into what my parents want me to do. So it seems like, if I'm not mistaken, you had this desire for self-definition, and you figured, like, if going to the US would give me that, or being where these people are would give me that, then I want to be there. Was that the thought process?
It was that's where the compass began to form. That little light would always, like, I would get that excitement and that inner sense of, yeah, this feels right, when I would look at these examples, when I would look at these stories. And since you touched upon the innate desire for freedom among women in certain countries, I do believe that that desire for freedom just exists in women since birth. It's just it's especially women in general. I think they are wired to be independent. It's just like the way they grow up, the environment that they're in convinces them otherwise. Most of the women I have known, especially since I started traveling a lot more on my own, I just see more and more women, and it's just from different parts of the world, like from Balkan countries, from Slavic countries, and from coming from like Southeast Asia. There's always, like, within women, there's always this desire to just be free, and now to be independent. And there are different avenues for it. Sometimes going a very traditional route can give them that freedom, so they end up choosing that. And for some other women, going traditional route is not going to give the freedom that they are craving, the independence that they are craving, so they build their own pathway. So I think it's a very inherent nature. And yes, in certain places it's actively oppressed. In other places it's oppressed because it's part of a bigger system. But it does exist in varying degrees. And my idea was, I cannot change the world, but I can change where I am in the world, where I am located, what I am doing with my time, and the kind of conversations I want to have. I didn't want to spend my life having the most mediocre conversations about where should I live, whether I can live by myself or not, whether I can pick the school or not. Those were extremely mediocre conversations for me. I wanted to have bigger conversations, like which program do I choose, which place do I travel to next, where do I take my next project, and that difference comes from being comes from choosing a certain location or place for yourself. Like really fighting to get to that place where you can ask these bigger questions and not be stuck in like some of the most again mediocre questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I mean, I 100% feel you on everything that you're saying. I think that's at that point of feeling like women are born with freedom, or we're born, wanting to be free, or not even wanting to be free, but we're born psychologically free. And I
Yeah.
guess emotionally free. And I totally, totally do agree with that. Like some of my favorite, like womanist scholars have spoken about that freedom, that innate, like oneness that women have. But you're right. It slowly gets, we could say, diffused out of us, and the energy that we would spend focused on ourselves and our own self-development and self-actualization goes into other things. And I love that you said, like, the path that a woman chooses for herself should be the path that leads her to the most freedom. I completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever that path looks like, whether it's a traditional path or it's a non-traditional path. But unfortunately, I think as a woman, the voices of society are so much louder in your head than your own voice. And
Mm-hmm.
um, how many women were told, for example, not to go into, STEM or go into engineering because it's a male dominated field, sweetheart, this might be a bit over your head, like different microaggressions and things that you get, even being an entrepreneur. Oh, well, you're how young and you're a woman, and then forget about being a woman of color. It's like, oh, really? You think you can do this? It's always the voices of society being louder in our heads than our own voices. And I love the fact that you're like, hey, no, like we're born with everything we need. It's reclaiming that. It's not be a stronger woman. No, it's reclaiming who you always were. And research just show, like,
Yes.
women are born with confidence. And you talked about Sheryl Sandberg, and we're going to get on a question about her
Mm-hmm.
being one
Mm-hmm.
of your role models. Sheryl Sandberg, I mean, one of the leading voices, we could say, in women's leadership for the 21st century. Lean In's research shows that women's confidence, I think, like peaks at age 10. It's like, whoa. So age 10 is the highest confidence that a woman will ever have in her life. That is very, very sad. And it just goes downhill from there. And it's because, at age 10, you start thinking about, what's my relationship status like? Who likes me? Who am I going to marry? Who am I like? It becomes very, or do I have a feminine enough job? It becomes very, very, a systemic how we're shaped after age 10. So I love the fact that you said, like, it's not be a stronger woman, be an independent woman, be a boss chick, all this, like, fake superficial marketing we get. And
Superficial titles and propagandas, like
exactly.
it's all propaganda that benefits a system, that benefits capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Telling you that you
Yeah.
need to be telling you that you need to call yourself a boss babe, a boss chick. Well,
Lord.
you are. I think my mom is a boss babe. Like I've seen her make
Yeah.
decisions for the entire household growing up, and I have never seen a bigger woman like bossing as much as she did. Like she was the reason why all of her kids are doing exactly what they wanted to do with their lives. How many women can actually have the ability to say that right now around her? Not very many. So, and then you touched upon Sheryl Sandberg and her leadership. There's others like um, Indra Nooyi from India, a former
Mhm.
CEO of PepsiCo, and then just um, plenty of examples. Ratan Tata, another former billionaire, and may his soul rest in peace. But another example of just how you basically choose your own path and do it in the best, most integrity filled way possible. But since we were on the topic of women, these are the women like Sheryl Sandberg included and Indira Nooyi included. And as I grew up, I learned more examples, and I always saw the same thread. I was like, these women, they're not trying to become anything, they just are who they are.
Mm.
Like Sheryl Sandberg's analyses, or her research on how women's confidence peaks at 10, it can be corroborated my own personal story in the way that I said when I was in middle school, I was asking these questions. because that was the time when I was completely uninfluenced by any other factors. I didn't know there were any wrong questions, and so my questions were inherently about, oh, what path? Why do I have to choose that? Or like, why do I need to do this? I still ask the same questions, but the difference is now that I've gotten older, sometimes I do get looks from people going like, "Huh? What? Like, what? Do you not just like really want that?" But back then, I think it was a lot more encouraged because it was just, a child asking questions. So people were more like accepting of it. But I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I'm still that child. From inside, I'm still that child asking the same questions. You know, you have like stopped believing in me, and you probably thought that, oh, she'll grow out of this one day. But I didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it. That's it. You didn't grow out of it,
Yeah.
And speaking of growing, right? So let's talk a little bit about your career and what you were able to grow into. So one thing that you said on our intake call, you said you wanted your career to be a story, not just an amazing career. And that stood with me because man, like a lot of people just want an amazing career. And I'm sure like in the San Francisco Bay Area, people that
Oh,
just
yeah.
want the amazing career. I just want the startup exit. I just want the IPO. I just want, the CEO, COO role. I just want an amazing career. I want that linear path to success. And whatever I need to do to get there, I'm going to do it. But you said you want your career to be a story. So there's this element of like, I think of like the hero's journey. We have a climax, we have a conflict, we have
Yeah.
different things going on in a story that we don't always have in an amazing career or a successful career. So in what ways do you think your career has been a story? And in what ways do you think the story of your career is still being written?
That's such a great question. And also, I think this is going to be my favorite question on this podcast because I am so driven by the idea of living a great story. And I realized it long ago, back when I was trying to think about. I was always this kid who was like, kind of strategizing what I want to do next. So what do I want to be what's going to be my next 5-year plan, and where am I going after this? Like it was just like a kid with her notepad and trying to be like, oh, I can do this, I can do that. Um, and I always thought most of the examples, the paths that I was being presented with, those were great career paths, and people do amazing in those areas. But it lacked fire, it lacked soul, it lacked a story, And I wanted all of those things, because at the end of the day, it's just a child asking questions like, how can I have the most fun? How can I do the most things, right? And I kind of continued asking those questions, but I think a little bit of difference in my story comes from the fact that I also really value ambition. I really value success in terms of like growing in my career, in terms of how do I earn more? How do I get myself more financially secured? How do I put myself in the positions where I have to take on more responsibility? I don't shy away from accepting that that's a part of my ambition too. Um, and the reason being that if I do that, I would be lying, because it's not just driven by only a story. It has to be a great story. Plus, it has to be an amazing career, in that sense. Like, it has to be a whole package. And going through that pathway, if I have to, let's say, compromise on a little bit of linearity in career, compromise on a little bit of stability that people seek very often, I'm okay letting go of that. I'm okay taking a lot more risks and making maybe a little less money in some areas just because it helps me live out a much better story. So that kind of always drives me to paint more colors in my life, to know more people. I just had this bizarre idea of like, I want to have friends in all different countries of the world. And when I mean friends, I mean like, people I genuinely relate to, people I can have like, long conversations with. And now 10 years down the line, I have that. I have friends in Germany, and we have like voice notes sent to each other like every other week. And these are like great friendships, friends from Indonesia, friends from different places, just like, a very bizarre dream that a child had. So like, I would take all of the bizarre things that I thought of. Oh, I just want friends all over the place. okay, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna make that happen, you know? So
Mm.
that, to me, that gives me like these little like fiery projects to work on. It just genuinely makes me very happy. I sometimes, a lot of people get to know about my story, my friends, family, maybe whatever I get to share on social media to an extent. Um, but a lot of it doesn't. But I know that it's just like an inner, it's more like inner quests that I have to keep following at the same time. So that's the idea of, living out a great story, and not just a career. That's where it comes from. But it is, I would say, at the end of the day, it is a combination of two.
Yeah, so I think you're speaking a lot about like the fact that there are multiple dimensions of wellness. And I think that there's like physical, social, intellectual, there's so many different areas of wellness, educational. And sometimes when we're very focused on the amazing career, we prioritize this one domain. It's like, oh, like this is the one thing that I need to be super excellent in. And we
Yeah.
very deep, like we become a very pointy person. We have like a deep expertise in this one domain, oftentimes our career, because of what? Because of capitalism, right? Capitalism rewards people who can produce the most, produce the best results within career, business, et cetera, education. So we go very deep in that, but it seems like
Hmm.
also, when you say story and not just a career, you're thinking about journey. Like, how am I
Yeah.
nurturing my relationships as I go? How am I nurturing my own, inner being and my own self? How am I exploring, getting out of my comfort zone? And the story is like falling in love with the journey. It's funny because
Hmm.
when you said you want a story, not just a career, I was like, man, I got a story being in this startup, trying to build it myself. I have a story, like I have a story to tell that I might have to write act 1, 2, and 3 of just building the startup, because
Yeah.
there's so many stories. But I didn't realize, like in my mindset thinking like the end result is the most important thing. You made me realize like, no, like it's actually the journey. Like, who are you meeting on this journey? How
That's
are you
beautiful.
changing? How are you, becoming a new person and discovering new things about yourself? And honestly, you could say the same. Anybody who's embarked to a new country, started a new job, started a business, like we are not the same people we were when we first came in.
Not at
And
all.
I think that transformation is the story. So thank you for highlighting that like it's about the transformation, and we should rejoice at the transformation, even if we don't get the high, we could say, paying role, or we get
Hmm.
whatever status symbol might drive us. It's like, oh no, there's joy in the story, and you have a story to tell because you lived life. You live,
Yeah.
truly live. Yeah.
And that symbol, that big goal, the status symbol, the big career, or like the figures that you want to have in your bank account, I think all of those things are actually important because somehow they give you a direction. But the journey can just be like super random. I still have a lot of those, I would say, just by definition, in and of itself, these are shallow goals. I have a bunch of shallow goals, but I do know that those,
Right.
yeah, yeah, it's just like,
Yeah.
I'm like, there's like a Cartier watch I want to buy. And it's like, I do have those goals, but it's not what it's I also have started to understand that I need to have those goals because they give you direction. It just, okay, if I'm driven by this big goal to take projects that help me travel a lot, make a lot more money, it means it will push me to be a person who has to wake up earlier, to be like more energetic throughout the day. Because how do you take on travel projects if you're like constantly lethargic? It pushes me to eat better. It pushes me to go to the gym better. And like when I try to tie these bigger goals with something that will improve me intrinsically from day to day, that makes my life a lot better. And I think at the end of the day, I don't know if I'll get there, if I will like make that exact number, but I'm 100% sure that I'm going to be like very happy with where I get, because I would have earned all of these like other rewards in the process, and I know I would be a changed person.
Yeah, no, I listen, you're talking about something that I was just reading. I was just reading that in a book. I'm
Yay.
like a behavioral economics nerd, but now I was reading about something that they call habit stacking. So essentially, if you
Oh,
want to
right.
accomplish something, right? Like say you want to wake up earlier, find a reason to do that that aligns with something that you love to do. So say, for example, if I take a dance class like super early in the morning and I love to dance, it's going to automatically get me up early in the morning because this is what I love to do. So not only am I like creating more exercise in my life, you know, mind body balance, but I'm also waking up earlier because I've tied the goal of waking up earlier to another goal that I have to improve as a dancer. So what you're essentially saying is like the shallow goals that we might have where we're like, oh, this is a capitalist goal. Well, we live in a capitalist society. We're gonna have
Yeah.
goals to survive, to
Take advantage.
thrive. You know, let me not even say survive because I think we're past survival now. Like we're going to have these goals to thrive. And I think that makes a lot of sense too, that you are speaking about it in that, you know, like allow these goals to make you work towards the other goals and embrace the fullness of everything you can become rather than just being laser focused on money or laser focused on the promotion. Because we hear the stories of people losing their health in the process, burning out and completely having to leave the job, or you know the random executive disappears and goes to Mexico for 6 months because they're burnt out. You know,
Yeah.
I think that's not a healthy way to live. So I really do love that you said that. I love that you said that.
Yeah, and I think it makes, if you really want to play that long game where you want to always win and always be growing and not just think of your life as something that ends at 30 or ends at like, I
Mm,
don't know, entrepreneurs are like, yeah, I'm probably just gonna, I'll be done by 40. But why? You that means you're not really passionate. To me, that's opposite of passion because if
mm,
you are really passionate, how can you just like burn like a firecracker and just be gone out in 10 years? If passion to me is like that's why give examples of like Sheryl Sandberg or Oprah, like that's what passion is. It grows, evolves with time, and it just continues on forever, even for
mm,
generations after. So if you're telling me that, oh, I'm this passionate person, I want to build this, I want to make like this amount of money, but you don't see yourself working and enjoying this process of life for a long time, then maybe you're not passionate, maybe you're just
mm.
um like disillusioned again.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. And speaking of passion, I want to talk about the courage, right, that you've
Mm.
exhibited within your career. So you did tell me that you are working for a startup, and I want to say, somebody trying to build one, it takes a lot of courage to say, I'm going to step up and be a part of a young organization,
Mm.
especially, you know, given your immigrant status. There are all different types of things involved with that.
Yeah.
There's a risk of if the company goes down, you might have to go back to your country. There's a lot of risk involved. So I want to ask you, like, how did you gain the courage to become visible within your career and take bold moves such as working for, you know, the startup that you currently work for?
I think it came with time. Isn't it? I think there's a law, Hofstadter's law, or something that says that it almost takes like twice as amount of time to accomplish something as you give yourself. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I used to think that I would just within like right now I'm like 8 years into my career. And I would say within the first 2, 3 years, I was always questioning myself, why am I not here yet? Why I haven't gotten to the next point yet? And I used to hide it very well, but I've always been very obsessive about like, I want to do this next and I want to get there next. And that kind of led to that eventual very burnout in a very early stage where I thought, oh, wait a second. So I have not developed enough skills to excel, and I'm already burning out just because of pure obsession with the next and with what to like with how to get there faster.
Mm-hmm.
So I am working against myself instead of working in favor of the goals I have. So when I learned that this way I will never amount to anything, I literally was very straight with myself. I said I will not achieve anything this way. It either has to be, if it has to be a slow and like a slow burning process where you eventually like burn brighter and brighter, if that's going to be the way, then we just have to be patient with it. You just have to learn, have to put your head down and kind of told myself that. And when I gave myself the patience around that time, I wouldn't have taken a job at a startup because I knew I personally was not very stable to like be the type of person who only focused on work quality, work output, because I did focus a lot more on where am I going? What is the next thing I need to do? I was very focused on myself as opposed to the work that I was doing.
Yeah.
Um, very focused on the output as opposed to the input I was providing. Output as in output by the company. What was the company giving me? What was the role giving me? What would be the perks, right? So I was so focused on these outside factors that I was kind of starting to getting drained out on the internal factors, the skill set building, the putting myself in the position where I would be the type of candidate that can be placed in a startup and take responsibility and not let the ship sink. So once I started putting effort into myself and I reached a point where I was like, okay, now I have challenged myself by taking enough projects outside of my comfort zone, whether it is in different offices, different locations, different different industries, even different niches of the industries. Even when I kind of developed that trust in myself, that's when I was like, okay, I think I can do this. Even when I was getting the job at my current at the current company, it took me like 6 months before I actually started the job because I was so scared of like letting people down because I know a lot more will be demanded of me in this role. And I could feel it and I could sense it. And although I had been preparing myself for it for the last 2, 3 years nonstop, when it came to my doorstep, I was scared because I was like, okay, I don't want to fail. But then again, I had to look at the repository of the projects that I had done, the places that I had put myself in, and see that, okay, I have been courageous. I have maybe not always succeeded to the way I wanted, but I was able to get through things. I was able to deliver. And I guess that's all that matters. So, that courage was kind of built in that process. It wasn't I woke up one day, I'm like, okay, now I have 8 years under my belt. I can totally like lead this project. No, like it was born from constantly giving myself examples of, okay, what if I take this project next? What if I do this next? And if this company had come to me 4 years ago, I would have not taken the job because I knew that I hadn't prepared myself to that extent.
Yeah. I mean, you're saying something that I think is so truthful, and you're exemplifying something that I even think about in my own
Mhm.
journey, and I'm sure many of the listeners think about. Sometimes we are so focused on the next thing that we honestly destroy our own growth and development in the process. And when you said that, it became less for you, less about getting to the next thing, and it became more about the work and what the quality of the work that you're putting out and the learning and the development and the improvement over time. I was like, okay, like light switch. That was a moment for you where you knew you could be in the startup and actually not just be there, but thrive there. Because I think that there's this false pretense that we have sometimes that like, oh, being in certain environments, startups move quickly. It's no corporate bureaucracy, da da da. So I'm gonna automatically have the moonshot goals accomplished. I'm gonna automatically have, the quick progression. And that happens sometimes. But then there's some times where the building is slower, the process is slower. And like you said, the flame can either burn bright and burn out. It can literally just like the water is thrown on the flame and it's out, or it can like keep on burning brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter and eventually become that type of flame that can like warm the whole house, right? So I
Mhm.
think of that all the time. And even in my journey, you're speaking directly to me, I feel like, because I've
Mhm.
had to learn like stop rushing to get the next and build something that you actually care about and fall in love with the process. And that is
Mhm.
probably the hardest thing. So I once you said that, I was like, yeah, like you're like the ideal like employee for a startup because you understand the courage doesn't necessarily mean move quickly. And I know in our
Yeah.
society today, it's like, oh, like I want the next accomplishment, I want the next thing, I want the next that. It feels like, especially with social media, we're inundated with accomplishments. So it feels like we always have to be doing something new, new, new. But what I realized is there's a beauty in nurturing what already exists and building
Mm.
and growing that. And
Yeah.
you know, that's a tough lesson to learn, but I'm glad that you learned it, and that like that's what fueled your courage, you know?
Yeah, that's where the courage came from. And anyone who's ever going into a startup or taking on any project that impacts other people, impacts someone else's dream, because startup is someone else's dream. I mean, you are there because you want to live out a part of your dream too, but at the end of the day, you're impacting something bigger than yourself, and it's not just about you. So it's so important to go with the right mindset of am I contributing something? Am I going there to contribute, or am I just going there to take? And I know these things have to be
Yeah.
transactional to an extent where you're like, okay, if I contribute here, I multiply. I multiply in my career. I multiply could be finances, could be impact, could be whatever your goal at the moment may be. But I think just approaching situations from the point of how can I contribute here? How can I make this better? Do I have it in me to make it better? Or am I just going to be a liability there? If we just stop and ask ourselves those questions, we'll see when we are ready to do things versus when we are not.
Yeah, wow,
Yeah.
100%. Are
Yeah.
you going to be a giver or a taker? So
Yeah.
you talked a little bit about being a COO, right, in the tech industry, and I want to highlight that and jump into that because
Talking about the moonshot.
you understand that's a moonshot, but it's a possible moonshot for you. And I like that you said COO because it gave me an understanding that okay, you like know where your strengths lie and you know where you're most effective. And I think a lot of people still don't have that clarity, that role clarity of like, okay, C-suite talk. Who am I? Am I the CEO? Am I the CFO? Am I the CMO? Am I? And maybe because of the politics around, you know, the CEO being the superstar or, you know, the narcissistic culture we have today around business, a lot of people would make better COOs, but don't want to acknowledge that. It's like, oh, but I want the top, quote unquote, top rank. So I want to ask you, like, why COO? And yeah, why COO? Like why COO? I really want you to go into that because I think that shows your self-awareness, that you've actually located a specific role in the C-suite. So I'd love to know why COO. I'm curious why.
Yeah, so it originated from one of the many examples, not one of the many examples, but a combination of examples that I gave you earlier, of just different women doing different things. Indra Nooyi being a CEO of PepsiCo, Bozoma St. John in Uber as former marketing. She was a CMO. Or just Sheryl Sandberg being a CEO at Facebook. When I watched their stories, when I looked at their interviews, listened to them about their roles, what kind of impact they make, and just what they're doing outside of their work. How do they present themselves? What type of work they advocate for? It became easier for me to figure out, okay, there is such a role that helps me be multifaceted, but at the same time be very focused on one aspect of building a company, whether it is either getting your technical expertise to a point where you can implement CEO's operations inside of the company and make sure those get executed well, because CEO will have an idea, CEO will have to execute it. So the execution portion can only be done when you have enough breadth to know different varieties, to know the marketing aspect, when you value people enough to keep people together in your company, but at the same time you have some type of depth within your industry, within your company, to know, okay, this is what my industry needs right now, and this is what my CEO's vision, this is where his vision stems from, right? So I think that understanding is what makes a COO role. So once when I understood the role, it just felt exciting. I don't know, like my first instinct was feels exciting. Feels like I can do and become whoever I want to become. And in terms of freedom in my career, in terms of impact and responsibility, it kind of checks all the boxes. at the same time, it's a public role, but it's not so public that I cannot control to what extent I want to be, public with my career. If I don't want to be public at all, I can choose that path as a CEO, which often CEOs, but just by definition, don't have the luxury of doing. And privacy is a luxury in today's time. So to whatever extent I can gather in my career, I kind of keep that, idea in mind too, that's going to be one of the areas that might get impacted as I grow. So that was one of the factors. Just understanding the role, looking at the women, the people, the human beings I was inspired by in professional world, just made sense.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's really, really great. I think that's
Yeah.
great because it shows me that you have that awareness. Because in college, everybody would say, well, they want to be the CEO, they want to be the CEO, they want to be the CEO. As somebody who is in the trenches of building, I know like we're not all good at everything. And the truth is, you got to find where you fit in. It's like a business is like a team. We're building a team. So
Yeah.
everybody can't be, we could use basketball terminology. Everybody can't be the point guard. Everybody can't be the shooting guard. You got to figure out, for this team to succeed, what is the role that I can play that's the best? And I think when I think of the founder to CEO transition, a lot of founders struggle with that because you are a founder because you're a generalist. You like doing many different things, but to step back and some people don't want to let go of the CEO title, but in reality, when the company begins to become bigger, it's not about doing everything or having your hand in everything. It's really about like, what am I the best at? And how can I build a team of people around me that are much better than me at the other core roles? So business involves humility to succeed at high levels, whether you're coming in an existing company or you're making that transition from founder to C-suite in your own company. It involves humility because you can't be good at everything. So I love the fact that you're like, hey, I see where I can add value to a CEO and their vision and what they're doing while also, flexing my own skills, because that's a collaborative mindset that I feel like a lot of startups lack, especially as they look to create, we could say the first executive ranks. That collaboration tends to be missing.
It's very, very hard to find the right people. And I think that's applicable in whether a startup is trying to hire the foundational building blocks for their company, or whether it is just an already established company trying to find people in their existing teams. Or if it is you're trying to find friends, or you're trying to, meet the right partner, or whatever it might be. It's just, to me, I have seen over and over again people, their trajectories, their companies and teams getting completely disrupted because they couldn't find the right people, or the right people left them too early. And especially in Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area is crazy for like ever fleeting talent. Talent retention in itself is such a big conversation here. People are always jumping the ship, and people are always just like, okay, where can I get my best, and where do I, get the most and get out of there? And that's a mindset. And also that's another bigger conversation, because I think the system here rewards that mindset. So that's another thing. But it's super important to be able to find people who can execute. Otherwise, ideas are plenty. Ideas are cheap in and of themselves. They're not complete. You need executioners and visionaries who know how to work with executioners, or execute. How is that the right word? I don't know.
No, that
People
is
who can
right.
execute.
Visionaries who can execute as well. I preach that. I'm different because I preach like, you're not a real visionary if you can't set the items and can't break it down, break the vision down. And I think a lot of people don't like that mindset. But one thing I realized in my own journey is that the startup culture is very rooted in white male, we could say, dynamics and leadership, right? As a Black woman, as a woman of color, the way that I lead is not how Elon Musk can lead, right? So he might have been the type of person that said, hey, mere mortal, get this done, bring it back to my desk at 5. No, like I have to be very involved. I have to be hands-on. I have to be very grassroots level. So I believe strongly that the visionary must be able to execute at high levels. Why? Because you will have to model execution. And I feel like in the most successful, I could say, organizations, the visionary understands, like you said, how to work with executors, how to model execution. Even if you're not the best at it, lay the foundation, create the systems, create the processes, set the timelines, and make, I'm a primary visionary, but I had to teach myself project management, teach myself, so it's all about like understanding where am I weak, how can I improve that. But like you said, like whoever gets you as a CEO, COO, excuse me, is going to be spoiled because you have that mindset of knowing how to work, in a process and get the process done, because that's what the COO should be. But, you probably see this. A lot of COOs are, once again, idea people where it's like, oh, I have the ideas for execution, but I'm going to rely on everybody else to do the execution for me. And I'm going to sit back and I'm going to just tell them what to do. Get this paper back to me, get this white paper back to me, get this, customer research back to me. And sometimes as a leader, you're also a teacher. You also have to show people what it is that you want. And if you can't do that, it's tough. So I think you understand that very, very well. And that's a unique way of looking at it, because the C-suite can be very hands-off for a lot of people. So I'm glad that you understand, like, hey, like this is about execution. This is about getting things done. It's not about just like vanity metrics. Sometimes it can get that way, especially for C-suite execs. Okay. So I do have one last question for you, and it's about culture. So we like to talk about culture as in like what impact people want to have. And, in spite of all your accomplishments, everything you've done, like you're someone who volunteers actively, and you talked to me about a dream of creating tools and resources to help immigrant professionals. So I want to know, like, what types of volunteer programs are you engaged with? How do they invigorate you to continue on your path? And even if you want to throw in a third question, what types of tools do you want to create for immigrant professionals? So that's like a layered question, but I think this would be a good end to today's episode.
Okay. Yeah. So that sounds like something that I am yet to 100% figure out, but I do have some idea of the places that I want to contribute towards. In my volunteer experience, I spent last summer in Indonesia. I was working at a school, a dyslexia foundation, and basically providing education to underprivileged sections of the society, people who do not have like just the basic means to get to the right school and to stay in the school for long term. And adding on to that, there is issues of like dyslexia and various degrees of and different types of neurodivergence that does affect their ability to stay in school. And no one's going to care about a kid who's coming from these sections of the society to stay in school if they cannot, I don't know, get their math right, I guess. So those are the type of like harsh realities kind of made me feel like, okay, there is this foundation that helps dyslexic kids in this area. Let me go let me go contribute. And I saw these kids who were just kind of just trying to learn how to read and write, but they had like such vivid imagination. They could color well, they could like sing well or dance well. Like they had these different types of talents, and one could never dismiss them as not smart enough, or these kids cannot like do well in society. It was just they weren't doing well in certain systems. So just an understanding of contributing into education started from that, and then contributing into towards areas where towards areas and sections where there is not enough support and not enough privilege to begin with. That's where kind of the seeds started, where I thought I need to be somewhere in the field of maybe education or helping people like getting into maybe building careers from the get-go. And then I was looking at my own trajectory in the United States and some of the struggles that I had experienced, not having enough resources, not having enough examples. And I wanted to do something like in my Venn diagram, I was like, okay, it has to be something about education teaching, okay, maybe finalize it a bit further, maybe mentoring. So I want to create tools for mentorship for immigrant professionals here in United States, so that they can get tools and resources and access to examples of people in their industries, and people, especially in engineering industry, because I think this industry is going to need a lot more hands on deck, and we are short of people. And this also means that it's a huge pool of opportunities, just that there's not enough guidance in here, and people lack the access to right mentors. So starting from something in education to ideally, I do want to continue to volunteer in the spaces of kids education in developing countries. And I do work with a couple of organizations in the Bay Area, who are kind of working towards that. There's one called Building Education. They specifically build infrastructures like school buildings and in developing areas. So basically, my love for infrastructure, my love for education gets combined there. So I am kind of actively in the process of pursuing volunteering with them. And I just wanted to give them a shout out because I think people should know about initiatives as such. And it was started by a woman of color as well. And she's I think she's a former pilot and has just a breadth of her own experience. So like causes like that are some of the places that I have volunteered before. But in my own area, I want to move more towards like mentorship, because I do think it will help multiply what I do. And I don't really right now have the luxury to completely veer off and, go back into like completely education sector again. But I will have to do something that combines what I'm doing, just so I can, because I spend so much time in it, I think this will be the most effective way for me to help people. One of the ways I'm doing that recently is to just create free guides and free resources, and I link them all on my LinkedIn, and participating in more podcasts and interviews, and just talking to school kids, and getting access to university panels to just talk about these opportunities for students. Just so they can get guidance very early on, and they don't have to go through the same process of figuring it out as I had to do. So yeah, those are some of the areas that I'm working towards, but with main focus going into the future being in the mentorship for immigration professionals through these various sources. Like this podcast, for example, falls into the same category of me just wanting to spread more awareness of about this different industry that exists and different ways you can just grow as a professional.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you, Tish.
I hope I covered
I'm
the answer.
excited. No,
Sometimes I go into the whole story.
no, you covered it well. And I think one of the things I love about you is that you're thorough in your speaking. And that's a great leadership trait. You don't leave any stone unturned. You really give thorough answers. You probably get that a lot at work. Like
sometimes I feel like I know I'm just like, and I tell myself, oh my God, I talk too much.
No, it's not talking too much, because you're not redundant, right? Like there's some people who are redundant. You're thorough. I'm also like you. I'm thorough, right?
Yeah, it's thorough. Yeah, that's important.
So I wouldn't say redundant, because listen, you would have saw my face if you were going on and on and on about the same point. No, every sentence, every word is a new thought, is a new.
That's so good to hear.
So thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I think like this episode is the essence of like, being a purposeful professional, right? How can I take my path that I'm on and really find the purpose in it? Because a lot of the people that I talk to, they're kind of like, oh, well, I left my job. I did this, I did that. They found purpose externally. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think there's also something very, very relatable in, hey, I take my role, I take my skill set, and I find purpose within that, rather than thinking I have to be a content creator or be an entrepreneur or look for purpose, look to externalize my purpose. I've internalized it and fueled it into my work. So I think that that's what you represent. I think that's very relatable to the everyday person, because sometimes I think we make purpose so spiritual and so large, when in reality, your purpose is really not even just in what you do, but how you do it. And I think you're introducing us to the how you do it, aspect that we often forget about, because once again, vanity metrics exist in every single career and every single field. For some people, it's, oh, I built this, I'm doing this big thing, but there is purpose in being behind the scenes. There's purpose in being integrated into your work and falling in love with that rather than the external effects or the externalities of it. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Yeah, sums it up really well. I do think purpose is right where you are. You can get started on it today and you can keep building towards it, and just have a little bit of patience, because if it's a big purpose, it's going to take time.
Yeah, nope.
Yeah.
Thank you for reminding us. Okay. All right. Thank you, Tish. I really
I remind myself too.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet. But again, I have vanity metrics too, and I believe in using them to my advantage. So use those to your advantage and integrate purpose along the way. I guess that would be the headline.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. This is the Purposeful Professional podcast, and we are out. Take care. Thank you, listeners. All right.